It's official.
Episode 129.
Check.
Market Rebellion presents The Rebel's Edge. And look, I mean, Pete's got his background. I've got my Spectre background, the big octopus.
I didn't even know what it was when he told me Spectre. But now I got it. I'm in. That's a 10X. Wait a minute.
Christopher Waltz, Pete. That actor that, more or less, I think he got the Academy Award for Inglourious Bastards, Pete.
Oh,
but
yeah.
He's been fantastic in so many roles, including James Bond's brother in Spectre. Even if it's adopted brother, it was really good. But welcome to the Rebel's Edge, folks. March 29th, it is episode 129. We're going to give you our take on stories of the day, some sports, some fantastic futures, macro minute, because that's all it's worth. Jared is back, working the board. Great to have you back, Jared. Mr. Gronkowski's back there with wherever Tom Brady's hanging out. I'm not sure.
They were all on some beach somewhere. It was Brady, it was Gronk. They're all on some beach. Gronk's pants are half off. I mean, I don't know what the hell's going on.
Well, macro minute, Pete. I'm going to say pending home sales, a little bit of a gain for the sales. That's not the price, because price wasn't what was getting hit. In certain markets, yes, it was. Mainly on the coasts. I mean, New York, San Francisco, LA, home prices were hit. But overall, the country was hanging in there. It was just the number of homes that were selling, and we had a slight uptick in the month of February, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a great one, John. I think my macro minute would be this. There's two things out there that people are back, baby. The George Costanza. One is taking on risk. Look at what's going on with the NASDAQ. And when you look at the NASDAQ, how about the mega cap tech names themselves that are actually leading the charge? On top of that, John, right up in your world or whatever, because you've been better at this than me, but how about the run in Bitcoin? I mean, it's up another 5%. It's well over 28,000. I think it was near 28,500 last I looked. Mm-hmm. People seem to have the appetite back, right? I mean, it got through 28 and it's above 20. I mean, that's a nice run.
Yeah. Pretty surprising, Pete, especially with all this crap. The CFTC, Commodity Futures Trading Commission, basically trying to shut down Binance USA and saying that there's been fraud going on there since 2019. I got a question for him, Pete. If it's been going on since 2019, what the hell have they been doing?
A great job. It's only 4 years, John. I mean,
holy shit. I say if there is fraud going on there, don't you think they may have addressed it like in 2019? Yeah. Because I would have been saying in 2020, hey, why'd you let it go on for a whole year? But now it's been 4 years.
4 years.
So either they're the most incompetent bunch of boobs on one hand, Pete, or they're a bunch of lying sacks of you-know-what on the other. There is no middle ground. You don't let that go on for 4 years. But then I've already used up my minute on macro minute, so I guess we got to go over to fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
Fantastic. And this one is pretty fantastic. We saw a big drop on Friday last week for crude oil going into the weekend because, are they going to save the banks? Are there going to be more runs on the banks? Whatever. Well, crude oil has run from 67 to now 74 plus today, Pete. And inventories were drawn down like crazy for crude oil. So crude oil futures doing pretty well. I thought I'd point out that the May 74 calls, that was the at the money call this morning, they're trading for $2.68 at the Merc, Pete. So rather than, putting a whole bunch of money down for the futures, you could also buy a futures option, and it's probably a smarter way to play.
And I got one for you as well, John, in the futures world, in the fantastic futures. I got one for you. So we talk about crude oil, and we've talked about this a lot for all the right reasons. You've hit on it. I've hit on it. We've talked about silver a lot. You've hit on it, and I've hit on it. Gold as well. But I think if we stick with that, how about this interesting move that we're seeing out of Nat Gas? And when I say move, it's not to the upside like everything else we're talking about. I mean, look at crude. That move, as you said, 66 basically to 74 in like the snap of a finger. Meanwhile, you look at Nat Gas, it just kind of sort of goes down a little bit every single day. Today, at one point, I saw it trading right at 2. Now, it might have gone below that. I'm not really sure. But I will tell you this, if you want liquidity and you want opportunities to trade something like that, well, you and I both know where you can trade those futures over on the CME. They have liquidity, and it's it's an interesting trade right now. And we've talked about wheat as well. I mean, we're seeing a lot right now in the futures where you're seeing movements that are definitely different than normal.
Yeah. And just one more thing about those futures and futures options, folks. Volatility for that contract, the one I described, crude oil, WTI, is down and slipping. So that's a sign of stabilization when you've got futures and the volatility in the options easing. That's a good sign. All right, let's talk about one of your favorite stocks, Pete. I know you've owned this one for a long time, and unfortunately, I've traded it rather than owned it, and that's Lululemon. Up 16% or over $50 earlier today. Lots of the 295 and 305 calls bought yesterday, and a lot of those 305s being traded out today. What do you make of this earnings and where they stand, Pete?
Well, the earnings were extraordinary is the way I would describe it, John. I mean, I look at those revenue numbers, pretty daggone interesting. The growth that we're talking about year over year, all of that. You look at same store sales up 27%. There is so much good going on there. Now, there is a negative, and the negative is that they still do have that inventory issue that they had last quarter as well. But John, they've been able to move around that very, very, very nicely. Yes, it did hit the margins just a little bit, but I think in the overall scheme, people are seeing a company that is absolutely hitting on all the right, cylinders right now. And it's trading at a 25 PE, despite the fact that it's up as much as you were talking about, 12, 13%, whatever it might be right now. This is a company that have done a lot of things right over the years. I think they continue to. They make mistakes, but they absolutely are able to just maneuver really, really well, probably better than any other retailer I know out there, including Nike or anybody else. And I think that's why people are excited to buy into this stock today.
Yeah, it's been a heck of a run. And again, one of the great ways to play it, folks, is with options, because you can define your risk when you enter. And you were putting, if you bought the at the money call yesterday, yeah, it was $29. That's $2,900 per option. But I think the risk reward versus buying a $295 stock looks pretty good to me.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk, Pete, a little bit about Micron. It's a outperformer today, up over 6%. They expect this. The CEO said he expects 2024, 2025 to be strong years for memory products. And we joked before the show that pretty much every year he thinks the next year is going to be even better, doesn't he?
Well, he had a lot of confidence, John. It's amazing how much confidence he had when you consider how bad the quarter was. I mean, I don't know that it could be much worse. And I guess that's what everybody seems to be clinging on to. How could it get any worse than it is? And well, we will find out. To your point, he thinks that 2023, 2024, things are going to do okay or better. Maybe into 2025, things already start to move around a little bit. I'm not so sure, John, but I did see that JP Morgan actually raised the price target after these horrendous earnings. They raised the price target from 65 to 75. So there is a lot of belief out there that maybe this is the bottom. Maybe they've seen the bottom and they don't like it down there and it's got more room to the upside. They still got to show us and prove it to us, though, John, because this is something that's going on for a while now. There's a lot of competition out there. The names we talk about are usually AMD. There may be Qualcomm, but always NVIDIA. You've got those names, and then there's the other names. And I put Micron in that list of the other names, like an Intel and some of those names, where they've just struggled. And for now, they haven't proven anything to us that they are going to be doing much, much better in the memory world, at least not yet.
Yeah, I am happy to see the sort of outlook that they have expressed in print and so forth, Pete. But like I say, I'm not calling the CEO a stock pumper. I'm just saying I can't remember the last time he saw anything negative out on the horizon. He's definitely not one of those guys that lowers the bar so he can step over it. He's keeping that bar nice and high, and congratulations to them. All right, Cal-Maine Foods, Pete, CALM. Now this one is a head scratcher. If you were expecting them to earn 81 cents and they earn $6.62, you might say, wow, how did you guys get this so wrong? One of the things that I really focused on, Pete, was the dozen eggs. Their average selling price for a dozen eggs was $2.30 versus $1.62 year over year. So in other words, they're up 50%, call it, Pete, year over year. Come on. No wonder they're putting up these huge numbers.
Well, when you're putting up those kind of numbers, John, it's on the back of having sales that were up 110%. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary to see what their numbers really did look like. To your point, what you're going towards, which is there a little gouge going on here? I can't say that, but we do know bird flu was one of the things that people talked about. That was leaned on a lot, but I got to tell you, these numbers were absolutely, I've not seen anything quite like it. And I don't know that they'll be able to continue this, John, either, which doesn't necessarily mean that the stock goes down, but certainly this big up move today is based upon the fact that, like you said, you're looking for 80 cents. You get something north of $6 on your earnings. People just did not understand the kind of leverage that they had, and the leverage being, hey, look, this dozen eggs has doubled in price. What do you want to do? People are still having to buy them. I'm one of them. I see it all the time. I look at egg prices, but I look at a lot of the different things out there, John. It's not just here where we're getting some gouging going on. I think there is across the grocery market right now. But obviously, this particular name, they really did profit very nicely off of this.
I guess they have to pay those chickens a lot more money, Pete. They got to pass that along to the consumer.
Yeah,
let's take a look at UniFirst. And at first, when you hear the name, you're going UniFirst, and then you think about it. Yeah, they have workplace uniforms. It's like protective wear for people in the U.S. and Europe and Canada. It's a lot of cleaning supplies. So there are a couple of them that are really big in the U.S. And they basically come in and they put all the mats down in the elevators. They put the carpet down when it's raining outside. They come out quick and drop the carpet down in lobbies of hotels and all kinds of things. So I'm not surprised that these guys have a real focus on them today, Pete, because pretty much they missed on every way you could miss. And that's why they're trading to the downside by 10%.
Yeah, the earnings miss was definitely bad, John. That was awful. They've been underperforming this year already. And then I think that the worst thing was, we talk about it all the time. You love to see what happened during the quarter. You want to know what happened during the quarter, obviously. But it's all right. Well, that was this quarter. What's it look like going forward? When you see the guidance that these guys put out there, you can understand why the stock was getting hit pretty decent today. They put out somewhere close to about $5. They were supposedly going to be somewhere closer to $7.50 or something north of $7. That's a pretty big miss. And I think when you see that kind of outlook, you're almost, it is exclusive. You'll see selling. People are going to say, you know what? Good quarter, great quarter, whatever the quarter might have looked like. But when that guidance looks anything like this, I think people definitely want to backpedal out.
Yeah, when you're basically saying, like Pete said, folks, that the street's looking for 750, and you're saying, well, maybe it's going to be more like 5. That's their earnings for the year. That ain't good, and that's a lot more than the 10% drop reflects. So I think this one could feel a little more pressure, Pete. Centos is probably their biggest competitor. And Centos is pretty much kicking butt and taking names. And I think that's why these guys aren't making enough money. All right. Let's talk a little sports, Pete. What are you focused on now? One of those dark horses for the NCAA, or are we back to NFL?
You know what? The NCAA, John, that's still way out in the future, but we got the NFL season that's right in front of us because it's every single day, 365 days a year. Part of the season is happening. And so, what I wanted to hit on today is this, and I'm curious what you would think as well. Odell Beckham. Now, personally, I feel like he seems to be a guy, now, everything we've seen, where whatever team he's been on, he seems to be a bit of a cancerous sort of a guy. So, I'm not as thrilled about, all of the people out there that want to say, you know what, how did nobody sign him yet? Well, they still haven't signed him, John. And I think there's a couple of reasons why he hasn't been signed as a free agent. He did not play last year. Why is that? Well, the year before, he was playing with the Rams when they were at the Super Bowl. He hurt his knee, and he hurt his knee in a pretty bad way. His speed has definitely been impacted. His strength and his ability to run the routes efficiently has been, it hurts a little bit. You could see it when you see any of the film of him, what he's been doing, trying to try out for teams and all that kind of thing. But I think I've got a landing spot that makes a little bit of sense, John, if he's reasonable, which I think he would have to be at this point because nobody has signed him. But how about the Minnesota Vikings? And I'm just trying to piece together what makes the most sense. Well, Kevin O'Connell was the quarterback's coach, offensive coordinator with the Rams during that Super Bowl. He knows him. He knows better than anybody. Is this guy a good teammate or is he not? Is he a cancer or is he not? So he certainly has the answer to a lot of those questions. The numbers that he put up with the Rams, John, in 12 games were not impressive. One of them was pretty good. He had 7 touchdowns, but the yards and all the rest of it weren't all that impressive. But when you've got somebody like Justin Jefferson on one side, we've got some very strong tight ends, one of them Hawkinson. You've got Kirk Cousins back there looking with the ball, trying to figure out where to throw it. If he's got a guy like Odell Beckham, he no longer has Thielen. If he's got Beckham on the other side, they might be a really good match. So what do you think of that? And where is there somewhere else you think maybe Beckham should go, or is he all done?
I don't think he's all done. And I think you're right. The Vikings would be a good fit, Pete, because they lost Thielen.
Yeah.
That's a superstar. And he is a guy that, for a host of reasons, has done phenomenally well. He's basically the equivalent in the NFL of a walk-on, Pete.
Mm-hmm.
He was either a late round pick or a free agent, and he turned that into being one of the best wide receivers in football. Mm-hmm. But he's gone.
Yep.
So I think Beckham could fit there. I've seen people speculating, Pete, even on Kansas City.
Yep.
Because they've got a pretty interesting quarterback, I'll say. Who's pretty good at finding open guys other than just Travis Kelce. And so I think that could be interesting, but we both know that the most likely spot probably is the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
And I think they could get him there. And like you said, because of the sitting out the year, I think because of that injury and the rehab, I think he could be a pretty good fit for the Cowboys.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that, John. I think that's a great idea, as a matter of fact. And it's something that the Cowboys need to do. They've done a lot in the offseason, actually. I think the Cowboys have quietly done a lot of different things that people have not really paid attention to. They all know that the running back is gone, but that didn't really matter because Pollard had already stepped in to take over as the lead running back. So there's a lot of changes going on there. Ezekiel Elliott will find a place somewhere, but it's going to be interesting to see how the Cowboys line up this year, and maybe even how the quarterback situation gets unraveled there as well, because that's not exactly a sure thing at this point, because a lot of conversations about the quarterback. John, how about Aaron Rodgers? Speaking of quarterbacks, I mean, let's go back in time just a little bit. On March 7th, the entire Jets contingency jumped on a jet. They went out to Malibu. This is March 7th. We're at the 29th, 28th? I mean, 29th. So, how long is this going to go on? They had a great meeting with him. He gave him a couple ideas on maybe some of the receivers, like, maybe Lazard maybe gets signed. He's already signed up. So what is it that's really slowing this thing down? It's the Green Bay Packers. So for all the flack that Rodgers has gotten all this time, and every once in a while, I think you and I would agree, he does some pretty weird stuff, and he does some things that, we kind of question, but it's now the team that's holding it up. And they're basically, I think, kind of getting back at him a little bit. I think Gutekunst, the GM, is sitting there saying, let's just stretch this out and make him sweat for a little while. Let's try to keep him away from getting what he wants, which he has said. I think he said it both on Pat's show, John, as well as I think on Twitter. You know what? I'd like to sign with the Jets. Well, he'd like to, but there's a lot of different circumstances that have to be that have to happen. They've got to give him the trades that they want if they want to have Aaron Rodgers. So I'm not sure they're going to be. They've already said they're not willing to give up the first round pick this year for him. And so there's other things they can do, but are we going to see him in the other green, John, the green outside of Green Bay, or what's going to happen with Rodgers, do you think?
Well, that money's too big to walk away from Pete. 50 mil, 60 mil, whatever it is. Yeah. So otherwise, I think he'd tell him to stuff it and he'd just go on an ayahuasca finding himself mission or something. But I think like when you were saying earlier that it's kind of like Favre 2.0 with the Jets, going from Green Bay to then heading on out to the Jets. Do you know what they had to give up to get him, to get Brett Favre, Pete? A conditional 4th round pick. So, and I think Aaron has a lot of great stats behind him for the Green Bay Packers to want to get more than a conditional 4th round pick for him. But I do think that if they play this too hard, they're going to end up paying this guy 50 mil, and they're going to be an 8-9 team over there in Green Bay, Pete, because they have not done anything. This frees up cap room for them. I know they got to try to get some draft picks and things like that, or trades of players for him. But I think the Jets are smart to be playing a waiting game. They've got till the 27th of April for the draft. So they could take this right up to basically the moment that they hit that gavel, Pete, to start it off. So I don't think that the Jets are in a bad position. And I think Green Bay is going to end up getting less and less as we get closer and closer to draft day.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. I mean, it's just an odd game that's being played, and we're all watching it, and we're trying to figure out who's the real adult in the room. Is it Rodgers with his, all the craziness that he's up to all the time, whether it's the darkness or whatever, or is it Green Bay themselves and how they actually have treated him? Not just this, but during his career there, John, where they never listened to him. They didn't draft the kind of players that he oftentimes wanted or maybe needed. Offensive linemen, some of the talented receivers, and all the rest of it. I mean, it really has been a real love-hate relationships he's had there for a really long time. They got the one Super Bowl, but I don't know. You look at Aaron and you'd think, you know what? At the end of his career, shouldn't that guy maybe have at least played in 4? Maybe. But that's not the case.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate all of you guys tuning in. He's Pete Najarian. I'm John Najarian, and Jared back working the boards flawlessly because he can feel that hot breath of Gronkowski coming up behind him. But we appreciate it, Jared. Great to have you here. And we'll be back tomorrow, folks, at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for the Rebels Edge. See you then.